Alright, welcome back to 31 Days of Fire Emblem. Ooh. Today we got a couple of articles courtesy of my main man for Kirby, Cory, who also said Awakening was his favorite game, so I picked it up and decided to throw it in here for 31 Days of Fire Emblem. And I'm glad I did. My only regret is that I waited this long to play it, but it is freaking awesome. And I mean, this article that he sent me, actually two of them, on how Fire Emblem Awakening saved the franchise, uh, is basically not proof of that. The game is proof that it saved the franchise. The articles are a reflection of that. And fun fact, this was originally scheduled for 2022 until 31 Days of Kirby came along. And yeah, so you can also hear you might be able to hear the computer plugging and chugging in the background because these websites are extremely ad heavy, so I'm expecting a lot of lag and a lot of pop up, well, not pop ups as in pop ups, but a lot of ads coming in, flooding the gate. So you have been forewarned. How? Fire Emblem Awakening saved the franchise by Hayes Madsen, published January 12th, 2021. So this is, well, a long time after the fact, actually, but here we go. In recent years, Fire Emblem has become one of Nintendo's leading franchises between the hugely successful Fire Emblem Heroes and the critically acclaimed Fire Emblem Three Houses. So there you go. This is after Three Houses. And well, that was 2019, I believe. It's a far cry from where the series was over a decade ago as a niche strategy RPG franchise, which is just a strategy game for those of you old school people like me. Okay, almost hard to tell what's article and what's not here. When Marth and Roy were introduced in Super Smash Bros. Melee, most fans in the West were saying WTF? Actually, most fans in the West had no idea who they were. Now, Smash Bros. Features a whopping 8 characters, more than most series represented. There's one game in particular that's responsible for Fire Emblem's rise in popularity: Fire Emblem Awakening. Booyah! And the related article, Nintendo bringing Fire Emblem's first game from NES, from the Famicom, jeez, to the West after 30 years, we've already gone over in the unboxing, if you checked that out on the previous video. Awakening, back to this one. Awakening is responsible for much more than making the series popular, however, as Fire Emblem simply wouldn't exist today without it. Here's how Fire Emblem Awakening saved the franchise. And then the next segment of the article says Intelligent Systems approached Awakening as its last Fire Emblem game. That sounds an awful lot like Final Fantasy. A 2015 Iwata Asks interview released by Nintendo states it plainly. Awakening was supposed to be the last Fire Emblem game. Notes on that later. Sales of Fire Emblem games in Japan had been on the decline, and the franchise had simply never caught on in the West outside of a niche following. Or niche, if you will. With that in mind, Intelligent Systems went into development thinking Awakening would be the last game of its defining franchise. This was the last shot for the developer to put everything in Awakening, and this meant bringing back elements from games like Genealogy of the Holy War, while also implementing brand new features. Now, I don't know about that, but it has very close ties to the first game in the series, which, with a few of the characters being named or outright in the game, so that's pretty cool. Clearly, no one expected Awakening to be the runaway success that it was, selling over 2 million copies and becoming one of the biggest critical darlings of the 3DS. Years later, Awakening is considered one of the very best games on the 3DS, and for good reason. The title nearly perfected the core mechanics of Fire Emblem, even while updating the experience for a modern audience and making it more accessible than ever. And how did it do that? Awakening redefined Fire Emblem for a modern audience. Now, take a quick look at that picture and tell me who you think that is, unless you played the game, and then don't spoil it for those who haven't. What ultimately saved Fire Emblem was accessibility, allowing more players to test the series and even the strategy genre without the punishment of brutal difficulty. This was especially important since Radiant Dawn was the previous game released in the West, renowned for its high difficulty. Interestingly, a translation flub contributed to Radiant Dawn's difficulty, since the English versions changed the normal difficulty to easy, hard to normal, and maniac to hard. Because of this, anyone that went into Radiant Dawn without knowledge of the series would actually be playing the hard difficulty when selecting normal. Yeah, if you do that, you're gonna have a bad time. Okay, Awakening toned down its normal difficulty and introduced casual mode, which erased permanent unit deaths, thereby making the experience as a whole much more approachable. And you will definitely need that in later chapters. I'll tell you that right now. The game still had a selection of higher difficulty modes for longtime fans, but making Awakening more accessible went a long way, and is something the franchise has focused on ever since, even with the latest release, Fire Emblem Three Houses, which I'll be starting tomorrow. Past all the difficulty options, Awakening's core gameplay doubled down on everything the series had done yet. Okay, done already? That's a bit weird. The world map was reintroduced, giving Awakening a larger sense of scale, and combat animations gave players options to change the camera for a higher action feel. I've checked that out, but I didn't actually use it for combat. The biggest innovation, though, came with the new pairing system and a way to revolutionize storytelling in Fire Emblem. Now, this is one of the things I really liked about Three Houses, which actually goes even beyond what they did with Awakening here. But, yeah, developing relationships with the characters themselves so that they can defend each other or increase their stats in combat and give you more dialogue options outside of the game is freaking amazing. And you can even pair them up. So if you have a low movement unit, and you pair that with cavalry or cavalier or great knight or something that has high movement, then you can transport them farther along the map than they would get themselves and be of great use. And that just blew my mind. It's fantastic. But back to the article. So the biggest came with new pairing system, way to revolutionize storytelling. Awakening featured more story than ever before, not in the main narrative necessarily, but through support conversations that added fantastic characterization to the game's cast. Support conversation existed before, but they were a bit hard to uncover, as it required particular units to fight next to each other. To fight next to each other regularly. In Awakening, these conversations were much more fleshed out, and in the pairing system, which let players combine two units into one, made it easier than ever to unlock them. Every character had a wealth of relationships they could build with other characters, and doing so provided both story moments and bonuses in combat and relationships. Support conversations added so much rich personality to the game's characters, making them feel like vital parts of the narrative, rather than just one unit in an army. Although there is some of that too, because there are tunes that I hardly ever used. But that's useful, like we said, if you're on permadeath, then they need to be replaced. Past games would give a bit of backstory on a unit when they were first recruited, but past that, they by and large became just another face in players' armies. Awakening systems let players learn more about the character throughout the entire experience, and become attached to them in a way that Fire Emblem simply didn't have before. Focusing on characters is the best thing Awakening could have done, and again, this is something that Fire Emblem has stuck to ever since. Fire Emblem Fates, Echoes, and Three Houses, which again is a lot of games in a short period of time. But they all focus on fleshing out its characters first and foremost, before the main narrative kicks into high gear. Yes. And also, I don't know, we mentioned that. Alright, moving on. Anything else? Yeah. If you could scroll, that would be great. And to finish off the article, Intelligent Systems wanted to go out with a bang, but in trying to do so, the studio managed to make the definitive Fire Emblem experience. It was the step that finally appealed to Western audiences, and the widespread sales of the 3DS certainly helped that appeal. And they talk about the Switch effect. Every Fire Emblem experience since has been based on the core ideals that Awakening set up, and it's already gone down as one of the greatest tactical RPGs ever made. They already changed it because they said strategy RPGs, and we just call them a strategy game. But, yep. So, that was Screen Rant. And to follow up on something they said, what's up over to IGN for Fire Emblem Awakening's success ultimately saved the franchise. Whew. By Cassidy Moser. This is posted June 24th, 2015, and updated. Thank you, because we needed whatever just loaded. Updated November 12th, 2015. So, let's try to scroll down, or not, because we can't have nice things without ads. Fire Emblem Fates has its predecessor to thank for its existence. In a recent edition of Iwata Asks, Iwata Asks, via Destructoid, Nintendo President Satoru Iwata spoke with some of the people involved in the development of Fire Emblem Fates. It was during this conversation that Nintendo producer Hitoshi Yamagami revealed Fire Emblem Awakening was actually supposed to be the final game in the franchise. So we actually get some first-person quotes here. Or probably translated, but we'll see. To be honest, when we made Awakening, we intended it to be the last in the series, Yamagami said, adding that Nintendo's then senior managing director and head of sales Shinji Hatano presented them with the news of the franchise's dwindling numbers. Okay. And we attempt to scroll. There's a Fire Emblem Awakening video review here. Again, keep in mind that I only have 2 tabs open here, because I'm pretty sure I closed everything else. Hello, computer? Hello, computer. Okay, we finally scrolled enough to read some more. Hatano-san, who was working as the head of the sales department, he said, the Fire Emblem series isn't making the numbers, so this is going to be the last one. And the development team member said, this is going to be the last one, so let's put in everything we want so we don't have any regrets. Then we had a big list of different things. I want to do this, and I want to do this, and the result was Awakening. According to Iwata, Awakening went on to become the best-selling game in the Emblem series overseas. This success, Yamagami noted, eventually led to Hatano asking about their plans for a new installment. We asked, huh? I thought this was supposed to be the last one. And Hatano said, of course, that's how sales works. If something sells, we start asking for the next installment. So we talked to everyone at Intelligent Systems and said, so, now we have to hurry up and make the next one. Okay, Nintendo announced during E3 2015 that Fire Emblem Fates, known as Fire Emblem in Japan, it's Fire Emblem If in Japan. That threw me the first time I read it too. Will release on the Nintendo 3DS in 2016. Fates also recently made headlines by becoming the first in the Fire Emblem series to allow for same-sex marriages. And Cassidy is a freelance writer and the co-host of a podcast about freelancing. You can chat with her about that and all other things geeky on Twitter. So that should be the end of the article. And you can see we've got all this stuff on the sidebar here. So yeah, I mean, Fire Emblem aside for a second, if they didn't have all of these articles linked and all of these crap ads and videos embedded in the website, it would function way more smoothly, and then I could do my job a little bit more quickly. But, okay, so, rant aside, yeah, Fire Emblem Awakening, I guess it saved the series. It's a fantastic game. We'll talk about it again in the future. And yeah, now we're advertising Super Nintendo World, Universal Studios. But anyway, yeah. I mean, so far so good. I'm 2 for 2 in Fire Emblem games. One permadeath because that's the only way to play in the original game. And although the 30th anniversary edition, if you can get your hands on it, because it's a little bit tricky now. Like what? Super Mario 3D All Stars, and of course Mario 35 is already dead, and Pac-Man 99. Anyway, I'm getting way off track here, but yeah, Fire Emblem's great. We're starting Three Houses tomorrow, my 2019 game of the year, and we're gonna play the Golden Deer and knock the DLC out too. And then, like I said, we're gonna finish up with Fire Emblem Engage at the end of the month. But and probably finish Three Houses and clean up as well. But again, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed these articles on Fire Emblem Awakening. Of course, I'll link them so you can read the articles for yourself and see all the ads. So I'll link them in the description. But thanks for watching. Hope you're joining me and playing Fire Emblem. Let me know your favorite Fire Emblem games in the comments. And until next time, keep dancing.